Welcome to the Leading with Empathy podcast. My name's Daniel Murray, and my guest today is Rachel Golding. This is a beautiful conversation. Rachel is an amazing human being. She has done a degree in occupational therapy. She became a researcher, did a PhD, focusing particularly in disability services. And she started almost by accident this amazing organization and social enterprise that she runs now called Dinner on the Table. What you'll learn from Rachel around the importance of caring about our work, the importance of the impact we make on others is so insightful. And her understanding of empathy, particularly in some of the situations where people are marginalized in our society, is really vital. So I think you're going to love this chat. I really enjoyed it. This is Rachel Golding. Well, welcome, Rachel. Good to see you. How are things for you in your world at the moment?
Thanks, Dan. Doing well. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation to be involved.
It's really exciting. I'm really interested because you've got quite an interesting background, having studied in occupational therapy and those sorts of sciencey sort of background, and then now going into something very different. Do you want to give us the sort of brief journey, the Rachel Golding story?
Yeah, sure. So I started life as an occupational therapist, um, and then moved into academic work, I guess, and had my academic career mapped out, and was really enjoying the research that I was doing. And then life takes different twists and turns, and I now run a social enterprise catering company called Dinner on the Table.
That sounded like a quick jump
A
between.
very
Yeah, I
It was
was
a pretty
an
quick jump.
occupational therapist, academic. You did a PhD. You sort of left
Yes.
that part out, right? I should call you Doctor Golding, but these things are pretty big investments of time and energy. What was your passion behind OT and study and that academic work?
Yeah, look, I think when I first started OT, I really loved the idea of working in sort of a health setting and understanding more about people and how they worked and how we could make people's lives better. And I didn't end up doing a huge amount of clinical work. Actually, I did work as a clinician for a few years, but not that many in comparison to the other things I did. But I did an honours degree and just loved the research. And I did a project around understanding mothers' perspectives of space and the home and how that worked when they had a child with very significant disabilities. My research was all about family wellbeing, where a family member had a disability, either parent or a child. And most of my research focused around women with intellectual disabilities who also were mothers. And I was trying to understand what being or becoming a mother meant for them, and some of the trials that this group of very vulnerable, very stigmatized women face when they decide to become mothers themselves. And so when Dinner on the Table, I refer to as the business that started without me. We're 10 years young. And a friend asked me if I would cook some meals for her because she didn't have time to cook. I've always loved cooking. I love good food. And so I agreed to do that. And fairly quickly after that, I started getting emails from people I didn't know asking me, could I cook for them as well? And they saw this as a great time saver. And, just to have a home cooked meal, I guess, that they didn't have to prepare was a bit of a boon. And so Dinner on the Table was born. And when I started reflecting on what might happen and where this might go, I thought, making chicken and leek pies is really fun at the moment, but I wasn't sure whether it would. I would find it really fun in 10 years' time. And so we started to think about, well, what else could the business do? My research, as I mentioned, was all about family well-being. And we did a lot of work actually and understood quite a lot about what constitutes family well-being and how do you measure it, and can you actually understand um, what makes for family well-being in families where there is disability. And we learnt a lot. The work that we never got to do was, what interventions can you do to improve family well-being for a whole household, however that family might describe themselves. And after Dinner on the Table started, it dawned on me that having a really good dinner done for you might actually be a family level intervention. It has an impact on your financial resources. It has an impact on your time resources. It has an impact on your health and well-being if you're, given really nutritious food.
Hmm.
And so actually maybe, cooking for people could be a really good way of improving their family well-being.
Hmm. Well, and there's also the relationship part, right? If we can sit down
Yeah,
and spend the time actually talking to each other and having a meal, or even not
totally.
having to have people in different rooms while they're preparing food. I think there's definitely some powerful byproducts there.
Yep.
The piece I'm interested in as well is when you're trying to work out. I love that sort of question, like what is family well-being?
Mm,
Because all government interventions throughout history have been very good at assuming they know what's going to work and be good for a certain group. Doing that and realizing it didn't actually help, and that research you were alluding to around actually trying to understand what's that experience like. I'm really interested in what were some of the maybe the insights or even those aha moments, those surprise moments for you. Were there any sort of moments that sort of eh, took you back a little bit when you were doing that work?
yeah, definitely. I spent a lot of time in the homes of very generous people who were happy to shed light on what their daily lives were like, and all the warts and all kind of stories. Um, what surprised me is there were families where you would look from the outside and think, child has a disability, but it's not so bad. It's not really debilitating. And these families were just about on their knees. Um, and it didn't look that bad, from the
Mm,
outside, and then you would meet a family where a child might have extraordinarily difficult medical needs plus behavioral issues, and there'd be just so many things. And maybe there was a grandparent who was very unwell and needed, care and all the other things. And yet they seemed to be thriving. And there was that sort of looking from the outside in, and I guess using our own lens of what we think, oh, I'd never be able to handle that, just wasn't a good measure of a family well-being as the family saw it.
mm,
So we developed a tool that actually attempted to look at who was likely to go to the wall and suffer really traumatic family breakdown, and who was, less likely to, who was more likely to thrive in that situation. And that tool was pretty successful in predicting
mm.
who might be at risk of out of home placement for a child, where things really traumatically break down.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it's been fascinating because my wife's doing some support work at the moment,
mm,
and diving into that sort of space, and the challenges for families, and the dynamics. I mean, let's be honest, in lots of families that don't have any financial or any
yep,
disability issues or any
yep,
any other challenges, we make whole sitcoms about those families
totally, totally.
anyway, and
Yep.
their dysfunction. So, I think it's interesting that comment. Were there any? I don't know if you can divulge the secrets of the tool or not. Were there any sort of things that predicted that level of, I'm going to say resilience, which might not be the right word, but that level of whether they're able to cope or not, that was sort of surprising to you? Were there factors that when you found them, you went, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought that," or "That's really interesting"?
Um, Look, it was interesting. There are, based on a lot of research that has gone on in the US, and many who trod the path before the team I was working with did. And I'm not very cognizant, or, I'm not really up on the research that's been done since. But there were four key factors that families needed, that actually we all need to have a sustainable daily life. And the four were fit, meaning, balance, and predictability. So we need to have a fit between resources and demands. That might be time, finances, health resources, all of that kind of thing. If there is an imbalance, you can manage it for a little while, but well, really basic financial analogy. If you spend more money than you make, you can do it for a week or two maybe, but it's not going to be very sustainable in the long term. Meaningfulness related to what the things that you were doing and how meaningful they were to you. So were you doing things day to day that fit with your idea of, your family culture, for instance? So did they line up with the things that were meaningful to you and to those around you? Balance was about not everybody getting their needs met all of the time, but but not one person getting their needs met all the time. And a lot of parents certainly express concern about their children who don't have a disability. If they have a child with very high support needs, they worry about all of their time, all of their energy is being focused
Mm.
on one of their children, but they might have, two or three or four children. And so, there's concern about whether or not those other children's needs are being met, whether there's balance there. And predictability is one of those things where, as human beings, we do all need some level of predictability. Now, that changes depending on the family, depending on the person. Some people live very happily with a huge amount of chaos, and other people cannot survive for even 5 minutes if they don't know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, that kind of thing. So there were really subjective things. They weren't prescriptive in the sense that they, it wasn't, well, this is the level of predictability. It was about how the the family sort of interpreted that or made it work for them. But this sort of theory also works in classrooms, for example. It can work in workplaces, in corporate environments, where if without those sort of factors at a basic level or at a level that works for people, things get derailed.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think Bo Lotto, who's a neuroscientist out of the US, says that your brain's only job is to reduce levels of uncertainty in the world. And when you've got the unpredictability or the balance doesn't feel right, and it creates that sort of uncertainty, it's something that we're not necessarily designed to handle long stretches of that.
Absolutely.
And
You get
I wanna,
exhausted very quickly.
yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying those, the immediate thought for me was, oh, I can see exactly why dinner on the table makes such a big difference, because it really actually helps to try and meet some of those needs across each of those. Was that sort of, I know you said it started without you, but was that sort of part of the drive, I think, behind taking you forward from where you started to where you are now?
Look, it was a little bit, it's sort of a bit of a two-pronged thing, I think, because the business kind of started and it was sort of fun. And then I I started thinking about it more and more and thinking, actually, this could really make a difference to people's lives. And it's a pretty basic thing. And it's inexpensive in the realm of, interventions that we provide and programs that governments put in place and stuff. Cooking for people is a pretty inexpensive intervention.
Yeah.
And maybe it has a really big impact. We sort of say, 1 in 5 people with disabilities are the largest minority group in Australia. 1 in 5 Australians, I think it is now, identifies themselves as having a disability. 4 in 5 don't, and 100% need to eat dinner every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's not only, as you described, the people with the disability who are benefiting, it's everyone around them. It's, whether it be parents or partners or children or brothers and sisters, there's all these different networks that we're part of. And some of those things that you described, the imbalance of time and creating maybe guilt in some of the parents. Maybe it creates envy or jealousy in siblings. This emotional sort of boiling pot can start to sort of manifest pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, totally. And look, the interventions that we tend to focus on in Australia, it is the landscape is shifting a little bit, but they are largely directed to individuals with disability. I'm a big fan of the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I think it's a really important step in, how we provide care and support for people with disabilities in Australia. But those programs are focused on individuals with disability, and none of us live as islands. We all need our people, and people with disabilities are no different. We need, usually the people closest to us are usually the people we live with, and very often they're our family, like you said, whether it's our children and our partner, or our parents or siblings, or whatever it is. And there aren't very many interventions that we're aware of that actually focus on providing support to the entire household rather than just the individual. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think that's it. Whether it be in a disability sort of situation for a family, but like you said, when you think about a classroom, if we just focus on one child, of course that child feels different and isolated and disconnected, and everyone else sees them as those things as well. If we're in a workplace, and I've seen this in working with teams where one person's underperforming and they sort of start getting singled out, and as soon as they start getting singled out, the gap between them and everyone starts to increase, and they feel alone and disappointed in the response. I think the things you're talking about have such flexibility across really groups of people. And I'm wondering, when I think about empathy, there's lots of different definitions. When you think about, when you're doing your research, for example, or even when you're thinking about going and supporting families now through the work you do, how do you go about, what's your sort of thought process in approaching someone who you don't know, they're different from you in some way potentially, but you want to try and understand them so you can help them as best you can?
I think for me, the idea of empathy really is about trying to put myself in their shoes and trying to understand the world from their point of view. And that isn't always easy, because we have to realize that we bring to the world a certain viewpoint, that we do see the world through a lens, and that immediately precludes us from understanding other people's points of view and opinions, really. So I kind of feel like the first step is being aware of that I see the world in a very particular way because of the upbringing I've had, the education I've had, the work experiences I've had, all of the things. If I want to understand the world from somebody else's point of view, I need to be really reflective on that and think through, well, is that actually true? Or is that true because I think that's the way it is?
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? I in my process for empathy, I call that first step being consciously curious.
Yeah.
So being aware that, of course, my head's full of assumptions and beliefs, and some of them are facts, maybe. Most of them are assumptions. Some of them might be useful, many might not be. And I guess when you get into that state of conscious curiosity, the challenge is, how do you park those things? How do you try and put those beliefs aside?
Well, I spent 4 years doing a PhD trying to do that.
Yes.
So that was one way. Yeah. But and the study that I conducted was a qualitative research project, and that was a really big part of trying to keep understanding what was I thinking about the situation, as opposed to what was I hearing somebody else tell me about a situation. I think day to day now, it's a never-ending process, really, of just almost checking your facts, checking, well, why do I feel like that? Why do I think that? When I hear somebody say X, Y, or Z, is it because of I am reinterpreting what they're saying, or am I actually getting to the nub of what it is that they are saying or are doing? If it's a behavior related issue.
And I think in particular for the work that you do, the bigger challenge I see when we're in this space is when the gap between me and this other person is small, my assumptions actually aren't too bad a proxy for what they might be thinking. And so I often hear people say, oh, I'm very empathetic. But when you dig in, and it means they're very nice to people who are like them.
Yeah.
They're in group,
Yeah.
they love them, they're so lovely to them. And my challenge is always to say, when the gap between you and this other person is significantly larger, whether it be through diverse lines or cultural lines or whatever the gaps might be, you'll find your assumptions tend not to work at all anymore. And so you've got to do a lot more work in that case. And I guess this is part of the challenge for sometimes for people with disabilities, interacting and talking to people who don't have a disability, because actually the way in which they see the world's vastly different. But I think we all have assumptions around what disability means,
Mm.
and we don't talk about those assumptions. We don't test those assumptions, usually through a bunch of different reasons. But we just sort of hold them as true and think that the gap's
Yeah,
too large and we can't
yeah.
approach. Is that some of the things that you see in your experience as well?
Look, I think I think you're right, in short. And I think what we realized very quickly, I think it's a strength of Dinner on the Table. We cook for families, households all up and down the eastern seaboard, Queensland to Victoria and everywhere in between. And we cook for paying clients, and we cook for families with disability who we gift meals to via our gifted meal program. The benefit for both groups of people, I think, is the same. We are all, women in Australia are still largely responsible for organising food for their households. Not to say men don't do it, they do, but on balance, it is largely still the domain of women. And women are juggling, and it doesn't matter whether you're just juggling kids who don't have disabilities and a job and all the rest of it, or a child who does have a disability and a job and a partner and a voluntary work, and your sister and a daughter and all the rest of it. The benefit is the same. It's just less work at the end of the day, to get dinner on the table. So being able to recognize there's not a special benefit to those families that we are gifting meals to.
Mhm.
I think the benefit is the same as to the same, to the person who bought the meal.
Mm. Do you see any I guess do people experience any differences in the way in which they interact with that? Of course, when there's things like gifting, I know some people feel proud and don't want that, and there's a
Mm,
whole range of things that can go on. Again, we're sort of dealing with humans, right? That so emotions
totally.
start to creep in and it becomes messy. But I
Yeah.
think your distinctions are good. What are some of the challenges I guess you have to overcome when you working with Dinner on the Table? You're doing this great work out in the communities, the whole range of people you're supporting. What are some of the challenges you face in doing that?
One of the challenges for us as a business was just to work out how were we going to do this? Like, what were how were we going to get meals to people? And so we've tried a number of different models. The one that we're working with at the moment, which I think is our most successful yet, I'm proud to say, we partner with a school for children with disabilities. So every child who attends this school has a disability, and the school employs a family support worker. We gift as many meals as we can, and we do a delivery once a month to the school. And then we have really no direct contact with the families who receive those meals. The family support worker then distributes meals as she sees fit, but more importantly, as the school community identifies people are having a really rugged time of it, this person
Yeah.
is going to need. And so what that did for us was actually take all of the decision making away from us. We put the decision making in the hands of people who actually know the families, and who can, that they're there on the ground. They know what's going on. They know when grandma's in hospital and it's all falling to bits. They know when the child is sick, or when, one of the a child who doesn't have a disability, one of the siblings, for instance, has, got a broken leg, and it's just making everything a lot harder.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the way we do it. So we have committed to gifting a certain number of meals each month, and we just give large size portions so you can feed large households.
Mhm.
And then for every catering job that we do, we invite our catering clients to add the cost of a dinner onto their invoice, and we ask them to purchase a meal. What we found once we started this program with the school was that the family support worker was ploughing through what we could afford to gift really, really fast. And she's sort of like, is there any chance we can get more? I sort of said, well, I can't really afford to give you any more at the moment.
Yeah.
As we grow, we increase the number. But so that's when we started inviting our catering clients to be involved, and people have been extraordinarily generous. They've
Mm.
happily add a meal onto their invoice. And so we just run a report every month, and we've got the number of meals, and we pack up a huge load of dinners and drive it over to the school.
And I think that's there's so many important things to unpack in there. I think you're right. People know intuitively that if I can give money for food, that it's going to go to a good cause. But I think the learning, particularly when I think about even my corporate clients, government clients, other people I work with in other industries, I think there's a real piece of wisdom that you might not think as as impactful as it is when you said it, but pushing the decision making out of head office down to the place where the knowledge exists, to the place where the information and the interactions and transactions actually happen. It sounds so simple, right? We'll just pack it up, we'll give what we can, and allow the person down there to make the decisions. But almost very, very few organizations do that well. They want to hold the decision making in a central position, because essentially that decision is a really powerful one, isn't it? From the perspective of the impact it'll have, it's a powerful decision to make. How many, who gets it, those sorts of things, and humans like to hold on to it. But by pushing that decision down, it allows you to make sure that the decisions are being made with more information. The reason I don't think they do it, and the thing I'd like to ask you about potentially, is how do you maintain the right level of trust so that you can still be comfortable the right decisions are going to be made down there, particularly as potentially things grow and there's multiple sort of positions that you need to have out in the field doing that?
It's a good question. The decision, maybe I can backtrack a little bit, the decision to work with the school and to work with disability services, and during COVID, this became just about impossible. We sort of almost had a program really well established at the end of 2019 with disability support services, and then COVID happened, and of course all the rest is history, right?
Yeah.
But one of the decisions was made because of logistics. So we did have a program where we were gifting meals to individual families, and we had a number of individual families, and we were trying to grow that number. And what we found was that a lot of the money that we were able to set aside for gifting was going into logistics, because we had to get the food to them.
Yeah.
So that's when we started looking at disability support services, and then came to the school, which is obviously a huge concentration of people who qualify for our gifted meal program by virtue of the fact that they're at that school, and they're all congregating in one place naturally because they have to, not because they're coming to pick up their meals. And so what the school has just done a stellar job, and actually they were doing this before we started. They did have a meal program, which was a little different to what we're doing, but I sort of said to them, I've never heard of this before. Can we get involved? And they were delighted. So they package up meals. They've got freezer bags, like sort of to keep things. All our meals are made fresh in our kitchen, and they're frozen, so they're good for transport. So they had insulated bags. They would put them on transport with kids. They drop them off at classrooms. The family support worker will go and find parents if she knows that a parent is coming to pick up a child. The bag has got a little card that explains what this is, that it's not meant to be charity in that sense of, oh no, somebody's more deserving than I am, exactly that pride issue, but that this is just meant to be a genuine support. And what she found really quickly was that parents would then start to talk about the meals in the playground and that kind of thing. And she said initially there was a bit of resistance about, oh no, somebody else needs this more than I do. She said, we've created a monster now. She said, people are asking for them. She said, the food is good. And so parents are saying, oh, could I have one of those dinners as well? Which is really lovely. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want people to feel like this is some sort of handout. It is meant to be just a help. In terms of how we maintain, so we have a very regular contact, like every month we're in touch with the school. In I think we kind of will manage it via relationship, really, that we've built up a trusted partnership with this particular community. That's probably the key, I think, at the moment to how do we, make sure that that I guess the outcome that we're looking for is being undertaken.
I think it is, will come down to humans, right? It comes down to people. It comes down to making sure that you got those relationships, you're checking in with the right people. I think, even thinking about what's this card say, how do we make sure we communicate effectively? Rachel, one of the things I find when I work in government is people say, "Oh, I wish I could work in corporate space. It'd be so much better. Everyone have lots of money." Then you go to corporate, and everyone in corporate says, "Oh, one day I'm going to go and run a social enterprise or a charity because it'd be so much easier and so much better."
Yeah.
But I think, from my experience, they all involve complex people issues, and often as you get towards the let's say the less profitable, purely financially driven industries, it becomes more complex in terms of those people relationships and emotions, right? And you would see all of those range of emotions impacting on you and your people and everyone involved all the time. How do you support yourself? How do you look after yourself and your team when you're going through some of those frustrating challenges of, look, we're trying to help here. We just need a bit of support? Or how do you support yourself and your team through that?
Look, I think the way that we, as a team, I think we have people who are really committed to, our big purpose in life at Dinner on the Table is to care for people through really good food. Now that counts for the people who purchase our meals and our services, as well as people who gift our services. And my team are really people who love good food, who love cooking it, and want to care for people through really good food. So I think building a team culture around that core idea has been really important. And I'm not suggesting the work is done. It's something you work on daily, right? But that is really important. Hearing the stories, we don't get to hear a lot of stories from the families that we gift meals to. We do hear a little bit via the family support worker, and I always try really hard to pass all of that on to my team to say, this is the outcomes of the things we're doing. But we want to respect people's privacy. We want to respect their anonymity. And so, that we don't hear a great deal of sort of snippets here and there. In any organization, I guess there's always, challenges to be faced, and how do you negotiate that and keep people going when it gets hard. But I guess, coming back to, well, what is our key purpose? What are we here to do? Is that, whatever we're facing, is it core to who we are? If it's not, should we really be doing it? If it is, then how are we going to get through it?
Yeah. I mean, you make that sound very simple.
Oh yeah, it's easy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. People are challenging, and again, it's part of the reason you exist is to connect people with each other and have better experiences. And I love that purpose. It really just sums up something that I think everyone can get involved with and engaged in. What sort of and you mentioned the catering clients. What sort of things are you doing that other people can buy in and get involved in the catering you do, if they're looking to support families like this and provide that gifting? What are some of the ways they can do that with you?
Well, look, the best way they can do it is ask us to cook for them. So if you've got an event or something coming up, or we do private, corporate, we do drop-off catering, we do fully staffed, we say we're the only catering company who will take care of your weeknight family meal right up into your large corporate function of 1,600 people. That is a huge way, because part of our profit is used to gift meals. And then, when we send the invoice, we'll send them we'll stick a gifted meal on the end. It's up to them to decide whether or not they'd like to do that. But so people can purchase meals as part of their catering. They can purchase meals outside, or gifted meals outside of the catering too if they want to. But by allowing us to cook for them, that's sort of pushing the mission forward.
Yeah, it reminds me, the power of food reminds me of I was in Thailand cycling for charity, and being separated, I was sort of by myself at the time, and pulled up on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, northeastern Thailand, and looked across, and there was this little family sitting under a little sala on the ground eating their dinner, breakfast it was at the time, and uh, sort of looked over and thought, oh, my helmet's probably more expensive than these people make in a month. Like it must have looked so out of place on this dirt road in all of the lycra, and it would have looked terrible. But anyway, so I looked over, and the father sitting there in the mat looked at me and waved and said, "Oh, King Cow," which means eat food. It translates to eat rice, but come eat.
Yeah.
And the first thing his thought was to come and share a meal, and I think that's the power of meals, isn't it?
It totally is. Look, I think people, I mean, we sort of joke people come for the food, but food brings people together in a way that other things don't. I think, people will come together around knowledge or, an event and that kind of stuff, but there's something different about bringing people together around food. Yeah.
I mean, it's where humans have, yeah, it's where humans have connected for thousands of years, and I think
totally.
your work is particularly important in an era where so many families are disconnected, looking at devices, eating food on the run, not having time for each other. That ability, I think, to take that weight off of their shoulders a little bit, to create an opportunity for them to really connect is such a powerful thing, and it's I really admire what you do, and the way in which you go about your work. It's the passion's very obvious, and you're coming from that background where some people maybe start in food and think, how do I help people with disability? You've almost come at it the opposite way by chance in some ways, that actually I'm passionate about this sector, and this is just such a smart way to really impact it.
Thank you. A colleague in Melbourne, when Dinner on the Table first started, I hadn't seen her for a while, and I was in Melbourne for a meeting or a conference or something, and I caught up with her, and she sort of said to me, "I haven't heard from you from ages. What are you doing?" And I told her about Dinner on the Table and what we were doing, and I think that's the nicest compliment anybody's ever said to me was she just said to me, "You're not doing anything different," and that was we're still trying to understand how do you impact family well-being.
Yeah. It sounds like that's your passion and purpose, and this is a great vehicle that can help with it. And I encourage everyone to get behind it, because it's something that will make a huge difference for people that you might never see. And I
that's right.
commend you for that. You don't make people take photos of themselves or write stories and those sorts of things, because really the benefit is when they look at each other and have those smiles and that time together. Rachel, I want to ask you some of my empathy card questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to get to learn a bit more about you as well. What was the last situation at work that really frustrated you?
Oh, good question. It was probably like tech related. We are trying to get a lot of, we've got a lot of processes. I laugh and say we should have gone into social enterprise t-shirts, Dan. It would have been so much easier. We don't, they don't go off. They don't need to be kept at a certain temperature. Food is complicated and logistics are complicated. And we're trying to find some tech solutions to help us manage our processes and stuff. But I just ready to tear my hair out looking at some of these things.
Well, look, if anyone's listening and they have solved some of those problems, there's lots of other organizations in your industry who might have some suggestions. I'll have your details below. They can get in touch with you.
Thank you. I'd appreciate all the help I can get, really.
Yeah, that's right. All right. This is probably an interesting one for you. It's your last day on Earth. What would you order as your last meal?
Oh, I might have to order two things. I love seafood. I
Okay.
might have to order seafood and lamb. I really like lamb, slow roast lamb. Can't
Yeah.
beat it. I'd put
But
veggies and things in there too, but you're not so worried about your health at that point, are you?
that's right. Your cholesterol, let it
Yeah,
go,
that's
right?
right.
It's the
Yeah.
last day. I've actually got some smoked pork in the smoker at the back at the
Oh,
smoke. But
delicious.
yeah, hopefully it'll be good. Final question, Rachel, how do you define success?
Mm. Wow, that's a hard one. I think I'm gonna have to think about it a bit, Dan.
Interesting.
Um, in terms of dinner on the table, I would just define success is if we can demonstrate to people how much we care about them through the food that we cook for them. If people feel like somebody has cooked for them, then that's a good day at the office. That's what we want people to think. We don't want people to feel like we want our clients to feel like somebody has cooked this for me and that
Mm.
has made a difference to my daily life. And in terms of my team, I think if we can leave the kitchen at the end of the day having done a fulfilling day's work, I think that's a good day. Like that's success right there.
I find that's really interesting. And I want to explain why I find it so fascinating. Um, you don't, when I work with some organizations, they'll define sex as the number of people they serve or a target or this many units moved, this much in revenue. And they sort of see success as being a bunch of tangible things.
Mm.
Whereas what you're saying is just ticking the box that they got a meal is not enough. Or maybe it's
Yeah.
enough, but it's not success.
Mm.
Success is they feel like there was someone at the other end who cared about them when they put it together.
Mm.
And I think if more of us took that sort of attitude with our work, that I'm not making a hot dog, I'm making this with that sense that I want someone to really enjoy it. I want someone to have an experience with it. Or, when I'm giving a keynote, I want the audience to have an emotional response. I want them to be moved and to care and to think that the world could be different and they could be part of that. I
Mm.
think for all of us, whether you're working in a bank, giving someone a home loan isn't the cash. Giving someone a home loan is helping them have the house of their dreams for their family or whatever the case might be in that situation. And I think the more that we take that definition of success that you alluded to there and build on that, I think, gee, it'll be a better world if we can do that for each other, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah. I think when I set out to when dinner on the table started, the long-term goal that I had in mind was to challenge how disability support is provided in Australia by providing for a household, not just an individual. And I think that is still a long-term goal. If we could achieve that, that would be a huge success as far as I'm concerned. But in some ways it feels like it is such a long-term goal. I think, well, if we never do it, are we unsuccessful? I
Mm.
don't know that we are actually. If our customers do feel like somebody's cooked for them every time we do, then we're successful now. And if we can achieve that long-term vision of actually challenging stop seeing disability support only as an individual an individual service,
Mm.
yeah, then that would be a huge win.
And the link I'm feeling there as well is actually the long term one requires us to do the short term one all the time
It really
consistently.
does. Yeah.
Because the moment I guess you sort of go, hey, we could scale this up by mass producing, making it cheaper, doing doing things that are bare minimum,
Loads
cutting
of
corners.
preservatives. Yep.
Yeah, just dump preservatives in there, freeze it as quickly. Whatever will happen, but we'll tick lots of boxes. Actually,
Mm,
you won't have that
mm,
big term outcome. And I think that's
mm.
maybe an important lesson we need to keep taking away from organizations like yours is that you have to care at each little moment.
Mm,
Otherwise, you might get to that big goal and realize that you're still unsuccessful because
mm,
you haven't done it the right way.
mm. Yep, yep. I think you're right.
I love the work you do, Rachel. I'm looking at having some events in Sydney and Brisbane soon, so I'm going to be reaching out to you
We would love
around
to cook for you,
catering.
Dan. Thank you.
I'd love you to, and I'd love to share that and to share your work with others as well. So we'll put all the links in the description. I would really encourage anyone who's running events, get in touch if you're wanting to have some nutritious meals full of care and love. Then dinner on the table is the way to go.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for speaking with me, Rachel.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.